There were no cheers when the motion passed. No applause rolled through the chamber of concord. No ceremonial chimes rang from the crystalline rafters. No banners unfurled in threads of light above the delegates' tiers. Across the vast circular hall of the Galactic Council, 700 species sat in perfect, watchful silence as the resolution burned itself into law above the speaking floor in cold blue script. Designation, Sol System, and adjacent human-held volume status. Restricted Zone Council access. Prohibited without unanimous war authority rationale. Stability preservation. The words hovered over us like a verdict. I remember the strange part most clearly. Not one objection. Not from the arrogant Velth, who objected to taxation, docking rights, gravity standards, and the shape of negotiator tables. Not from the priest envoys of Ilir, who wrapped every motion in ritual challenge. Not from the Siren Combine, who believe all closed borders were primitive. Even the Karad Dominion, whose admirals had once argued that no frontier should exist where a fleet could pass, sat with their armored jaws locked and their eyes lowered. No one objected, because everyone in that chamber remembered what had happened at Hecaton Gate. I was there when the vote was called, recording every word for the archives of the Thren Concordium. My name is Sale of the Ninth Memory Choir, Senior Witness Cast, assigned to observe council crises and preserve the truth of empires too proud to admit fear. My people do not participate in conquest. We do not command fleets. We remember. And on that day, as the representatives of the galaxy formally sealed off human space as though it were a plague source, a forbidden's tomb, or the den of some sleeping celestial predator, I understood that memory had become a form of warning. The speaker drifted above the central dais, his translucent mantle glowing dimly with exhaustion. Speaker Erix of the Pelagian hegemony had presided through 17 border wars, 3 succession collapses, and the unraveling of the Vorn trade lattice. I had seen him condemn entire worlds with less strain in his voice than he carried now. This measure, he said, each syllable amplified into the chamber's silence, is not an admission of defeat. No one moved. It is not a surrender of principle, he continued. It is a preservation of galactic continuity. Contact protocols with the human assembly are suspended. Military transit through bordering sectors is forbidden. Survey, espionage, colonial charter, and salvage claims are void within the restricted volume. Violation shall constitute aggression against the council itself. Still no movement. Then a low, metallic laugh came from the Karad delegation. It was not mockery. It was the sound of something brittle giving way. Call it what it is, rumbled Marshal Torgith, his scarred crest catching the chamber lights. A quarantine. A ripple went through the tiers, not outrage, but recognition. The word had already existed in the minds of half the chamber. Torgith had merely dragged it into speech. Speaker Erix's gaze hardened. Mind your language, Marshal. Torgith leaned forward on his reinforced forelimbs. He had lost 2 sons and an entire attack cohort at Hecaton Gate. I do, better than most. We are not preserving continuity. We are drawing a line around a species we failed to understand and praying they decide not to cross it. That should have ignited protest. It should have shattered diplomatic restraint. Instead, it spread through the hall like a confession too honest to punish. I marked every face in my memory. Fear looks different in different species. In the Velth, it manifested as stillness, so complete their sensory plumes folded tight against the skull. In the Siren, as rapid flickers across their bioluminescent skin. In the machine synods of Talar, as minute delays in their collective response lattice. In the organic swarms of the Un, as a synchronized cessation of mandible song. In humans, I would later learn, fear often masquerades as humor. At the time, all I knew was that the galaxy's ruling powers had just declared one small, upstart species too dangerous to provoke, and none of us yet understood how that had happened. Humans had arrived on the galactic stage only 83 standard cycles earlier. They were, by every accepted metric, an unimpressive people. Their homeworld was unremarkable in mass, its star ordinary, its system resource poor compared to the opulent nursery rings of the Oran Ascendancy or the antimatter-rich belts of Carrid core space. Their lifespan was brief. Their governments had been fractured for most of their pre-contact history. Their first transmissions into the wider lattice were chaotic, multilingual, and soaked in contradiction art. Threats, mathematics, jokes, distress calls, music, military encryption, weather reports, and something called late-night radio. The Council's first classification had been almost indulgent. Species designation: human. Disposition: socially volatile. Militarily limited. Economically adaptive. Recommended policy: managed integration. Managed integration was what the great powers called it when they expected a new civilization to become useful. And humans were useful. They settled hard worlds no one else wanted. They repaired derelict stations in radiation seas. They served on mixed crews in piracy belts where casualty rates broke older species. They bought bad land, mined impossible moons, stitched trade paths through unstable territories, and somehow profited in places where actuarial systems predicted collapse. Human corporations appeared in dying sectors and made them breathe again. Human diplomats smiled too much. Human soldiers asked too many questions. Human engineers treated accepted safety margins as personal insults. They were irritating. That was the consensus. Flexible, clever, industrious, emotionally erratic, politically divided, culturally contagious. But dangerous? No, not truly, not on a galactic scale. Their fleets were modest, their colonies scattered. Their war doctrine, what little our analysts understood of it, seemed rooted in obsolete principles: redundancy, attrition tolerance, decentralized initiative, and command elasticity. Primitive, many said. Inelegant. The Velth Strategic Academy published a widely cited paper concluding that human military culture was a relic survival behavior carried upward from pre-unification tribal structures. The humans responded by inviting the paper's authors to observe one of their fleet exercises. The Velth declined. Even so, no one in the Council considered humanity a strategic threat. Not then. They were too busy, too argumentative, too young. The first real tension had not begun with war, but with maps. There is a lesson in this. One humans understand instinctively, and most elder species forget. Maps are not neutral. Every borderline is a story about who matters. Every claimed corridor is a wager backed by engines. The disputed region was a sparse cluster of stars along the Perseid Reach, where human expansion had begun to brush against Carrid patrol zones and old, half-abandoned Council protectorates. It was not rich territory. It did not hold relic vaults, hyperlane anchors, or major agricultural worlds. It held way stations, listening posts, prospecting rights, and future possibilities. The kind of empty place empires dismiss until someone else starts building there. Humans built there. At first they asked permission. When the petitions drowned in Council committees, they leased from local systems. When the leases were challenged, they built in orbit. When those stations were harassed by privaters with suspicious ties to recognized powers, humans armed their freighters. When the freighters survived, they escorted convoys. When escorts proved insufficient, they deployed naval pickets and claimed the moves were purely defensive. The Council called it destabilizing opportunism. Humans called it protecting civilians. That phrase appeared again and again in the record. Protecting civilians. It sounded so simple, so morally decorative. Most delegates heard it as a pretext, the sort of sentimental language younger species used when they lacked the sophistication to frame strategic aims honestly. But the humans kept using it, even when it cost them. Especially when it cost them. My first direct encounter with one came 16 cycles before the vote at a logistics summit over the neutral world of Sithra. I had expected bluster. Instead, I found Ambassador Elena Merrick, a narrow-faced primate wrapped in dark formal cloth, carrying herself with the disconcerting calm of someone who knew exactly how much chaos sat behind her smile. She greeted me by name before I had introduced myself. "Archivist Sale," she said, extending a fragile-looking hand. "I've read your account of the Vorn collapse. Terrifyingly elegant prose." "Few species describe societal breakdown as elegant," I replied. She smiled faintly. "The ones that survive it do." There was humor in her tone, but something colder beneath it. A hard interior, like metal under paint. We spoke for 13 minutes about trade corridors, archival ethics, and human funerary customs. She asked more questions than she answered. When I mentioned the Council's growing concerns over human fortification in the Reach, she tilted her head and gave a response I archived at the time as merely clever. "We fortify where we are told we are unnecessary," she said. "History suggests those places become important without warning." I asked if humanity expected war. Her eyes moved briefly to the observation glass, beyond which freighters drifted in the dock lanes like seeds in black water. "No," she said. "We expect pressure. War is what happens when powerful people convince themselves pressure has no consequences." At the time, I thought it diplomat's theater, an elegant warning designed to sound grave without committing the threat. I did not yet know that humans often told the truth so plainly others mistook it for rhetoric. The crisis that became Hecaton Gate began, officially, with an inspection dispute. Unofficially, it began because the Council's major powers had decided humanity needed correction. The pretext was legal enough. A human-built transit array in the Perseid Reach was accused of violating charter restrictions on military-capable infrastructure near protected volumes. Intelligence summaries later contested, then quietly sealed claimed the array masked weapons telemetry and unauthorized drive harmonics. Karad commanders demanded access. Velth security blocks supported them. Sanctions followed. Human petitions were ignored. A joint compliance task force formed with suspicious speed. The stated goal was inspection and de-escalation. The deployed tonnage suggested otherwise. Even then, many believed the outcome would be simple. A display of force, some diplomatic outrage, human withdrawal, a few sanctions, a revised treaty, perhaps a symbolic concession, so the young species could save face. The pattern was ancient. The galaxy had seen it before. Emerging powers pushed, established powers pressed back, commerce resumed. No one imagined the compliance fleet would disappear from tactical networks for 11 minutes. No one imagined the first survivors would return without their flagships. And no one imagined that humanity had prepared for such a moment for decades in silence, behind shipyard walls and mining fronts, and civilian infrastructure projects everyone else had deemed too scattered to matter. I did not know any of that when the vote passed. What I knew was this. After the resolution, the speaker adjourned the chamber without ceremony. Delegates rose in murmuring clusters. Security drones hummed low along the walls. Above the chamber floor, the blue text of the new law faded to embers and vanished. Then every public display in the hall darkened at once. A pulse of static rolled through the chamber. Delegates froze. The council guards snapped weapons free. My memory crest flared with alarm. Across the blackened screens, a signal forced its way through every secured channel in the seat of galactic government. Not hacked, authorized. A human face appeared older, lined, uniformed in severe black, silver stars at the collar. The eyes were gray and terribly steady. Several delegates recognized him at once. I heard the name spoken in disbelief from 3 different tiers. Admiral Solomon Vey, dead, according to every official casualty ledger from Hecaton Gate. The chamber fell into absolute silence as the Admiral looked directly out of the screens, as if he could see each of us where we stood. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost gentle. "Council delegates," he said, "thank you for finally closing the border." He paused. "Now we can begin." and every light in the chamber went out. For 3 full seconds after the chamber went dark, no one breathed, not the delegates, not the security cadres lining the upper galleries, not even the speaker's defense drones, which hovered midair with their emitters charged and nowhere to fire. The darkness in the council hall was total, a blackout so complete it erased the shimmer of atmospheric shields and the emergency path lines in the floor. It was not a power failure. It was precision. Someone had reached into the most secure political structure in known space and turned certainty off. Then the backup lumens flared crimson. The chamber reappeared in fragments faces, armor, polished stone, a speaker suspended over the dais like a blood-lit ghost. Panic did not erupt. That was the most terrible detail. Panic would have been ordinary. This was worse. Disciplined fear. Admiral Solomon Vey's image still hung over the central floor, rendered now in emergency red, his expression unchanged. He stood in what appeared to be a command vault of some kind, not a bridge. Too dark for that, too enclosed. Behind him loomed a wall of observation glass, and beyond it moved the dim silhouettes of vessels so large my mind rejected their scale. Speaker Eric's found his voice first, cut the signal. A Talar machine synod delegate snapped back without looking up from its wrist lattice. "We are attempting." "Attempt faster." "It is not within chamber systems," the machine replied. "The transmission is being carried on authenticated council priority channels." That was impossible. Every being present knew it. Council priority channels required layered biometric, diplomatic, and quantum key authorization from multiple sovereign blocks. To hijack one would be an outrage. To hijack all of them at once was the sort of feat usually discussed only in war simulations and paranoid budget hearings. Admiral Vey inclined his head very slightly, as if acknowledging the thought. "We did not breach your systems," he said. "We inherited them." The words struck the hall like a kinetic round. Marshal Torgeth's massive claw closed around the railing before him, metal groaning under the pressure. "Explain yourself, human." Vey's eyes shifted, not deferentially, but as though he were selecting which truth to hand to a room full of people he did not trust. "No," he said. "You explain yourselves first." The image behind him sharpened. Those vessels in the dark were warships, human warships, though unlike any human tonnage ever registered in Council intelligence. Their hulls were black and angular, layered in cathedral-like armor bands and lattice apertures that glowed with restrained blue-white heat. They were not elegant the way Siren ships were elegant, all flowing geometry and light. They were not brutal in the blunt Carrid style. They looked built around a single uncompromising doctrine. Endure the first blow, then remain. The chamber erupted into overlapping demands. Where are you transmitting from? How are you alive? What is this threat? Is this an admission of hostile intent? Vey let the noise wash over him until Speaker Eric slammed a command pulse through the hall, forcing silence. Then the Admiral spoke again. "You declared our space off limits," he said. "A prudent decision. We will honor it for as long as you do. But let us retire a few dangerous misconceptions before anyone makes a fatal error." His gaze seemed to settle on no one and everyone. "You believed humanity expanded through improvisation. That was your first mistake. We did improvise. We also planned. You saw scattered colonies, competing governments, civilian shipyards, private mining concerns, mercenary escorts, agricultural vaults, research stations, and redundancy projects. You assumed fragmentation. You assumed inefficiency." The corners of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "You mistook distributed preparation for disunity." That phrase lodged in me at once. I am Thren. My kind preserve patterns. We survive by noticing when the same shape appears under different names. And in that moment, as the human admiral spoke to the assembled powers of the galaxy with the calm of a man addressing weather, I began to see that the Council had not merely underestimated human strength. It had misunderstood the architecture of human civilization. Humans had never built the way elder empires built. Older species pursued perfection, centrality, elegant dependence. We created great capitals, efficient supply lattice, optimized command pyramids, immaculate categories. We trimmed away waste. We connected everything to everything else until power flowed beautifully through a few indispensable arteries. Humans did the opposite. They duplicated, buried, scattered. They left old systems running beside new ones. They built shipyards under civilian registries and emergency farms beneath university domes. They trained militias under disaster law, engineers under military grants, medics under colonial charters. They overstocked fuel, overbuilt armor, overstaffed transports, and maintained obsolete manufacturing lines long after market logic said they should die. Council economists had mocked this for decades. Human infrastructure reports were full of redundancies, regional authorities, overlapping jurisdictions, reserve depots for reserve depots, and strange cultural doctrines with names like continuity planning, mutual aid, second strike survivability, and failed deadly deterrence. Every elder species analysis converged on the same conclusion. Humanity was wasting resources because it had not yet matured into true efficiency. The more I learned later, the more horrifying the truth became. They had matured. This was the mature form. Ambassador Elena Merrick had once told me, during that summit on Cythera, that humans were descended from creatures who survived not by being strongest, but by assuming the next disaster was already on its way. I had thought it poetic exaggeration. Now, under the Council's red emergency light, I began to understand. Speaker Eric steadied himself. Admiral Vey, you stand accused of unlawful interference in Council systems, military intimidation, and fraudulent identity. You were listed among the dead at Hecaton Gate. Vey nodded once. I know. We wrote the casualty report? A collective chill moved through the chamber. You falsified your own losses? Said a Velth delegate, plumes shivering in disbelief. We concealed strategic continuity, they replied. You were preparing decapitation logic. We declined to assist. Marshal Torgeth gave a sound halfway between a snarl and a laugh. So the old Wolf survived. Convenient. No, said Vey. Planned. He lifted one hand. The image shifted again. Now the display showed Hecaton Gate. Every being in the chamber knew the official record. A joint compliance fleet had advanced on the human transit array, demanding inspection access. Human local defense forces resisted. Escalation followed. Jamming, missile exchange, unknown drive event distortion, catastrophic fleet losses. Surviving Council vessels retreated. Human tactical records were withheld. The entire incident became sealed testimony under continuity privilege. What Vey showed us was not the official record. It began earlier. Weeks earlier. Convoys moving through the Reach under civilian flags. Tugboats, ore carriers, habitat modules, debris haulers. The sort of traffic no admiral studies closely because the galaxy is full of it and logistics is invisible until it fails. But under the overlays Vey projected, the civilian haze resolved into a hidden geometry. Mass transfers, staggered orbital insertions, synchronized transponder ghosts, thermal masking, modular payload swaps. What we had seen as clutter had been a deployment. The compliance fleet had not approached an exposed transit array. It had sailed into a fortress disguised as infrastructure. Murmurs turned to stunned silence. The gate itself, a long artificial ring anchored in the gravity fold between two dead worlds, had been altered in stages over 9 standard years. Cargo collars were actually armored track spines. Power buffering stations concealed heat sinks for spinal weapons. Navigation beacons doubled as synchronized targeting nodes. Mining depots hid autonomous drone swarms cold sleeping in ore canisters. Even the migrant habitats nearby, those vulnerable cylinders, whose presence had outraged some council strategists, who called them human shield tactics, turned out to have been evacuated 72 hours before the fleet arrived. The compliance force had come expecting moral leverage and found an empty kill space. "You evacuated civilians before hostilities," Speaker Eric said quietly. "Yes," said Vey. "Then you anticipated battle. We anticipated inspection backed by unlawful force. Your admirals were not subtle." The speaker's mantle flickered with restrained fury. "You set a trap." Vey's face did not change. "No, we set a defense. You insisted on entering it." There are moments when truth becomes unbearable, not because it is unclear, but because it is clear in the wrong direction. Around me, delegates wrestled with that inversion. We had told ourselves the young species was reckless, reactive, emotional. Yet every new layer of the display revealed patience, preparation, discipline across years. A species everyone thought governed by short lifespans and volatile politics had laid a strategic snare so vast it disappeared inside civilian normalcy. And still, that was not the worst part. The worst part was that Hecaton Gate had not been built to destroy the compliance fleet. It had been built to survive a larger one. Vey showed us force ratios. The human defenses engaged at only 38% of local reserve capability. 2 heavy platforms had remained silent throughout the battle. 4 mobile production tenders withdrew before firing. Deep-buried moon batteries never activated. Drone reserves were held back. Reinforcement windows remained unopened. Talar machine delegates began speaking to one another in bursts of machine light, so rapid that even their translators lagged. One phrase made it through: demonstration threshold. They had not been fighting for victory alone. They had been teaching. I felt then, perhaps for the first time in my life, what it must be like to watch a mask come off an entire civilization. The council had believed human openness was innocence. Their chatter, commerce, arguments, art exports, frontier bravado, all of it had painted them as transparent. Loud species are often assumed shallow. But loudness, I realized, can be camouflage. Noise can hide counting. Humor can hide doctrine. Disorder can hide consensus so deep it never needs to announce itself. A Siren delegate rose, her skin flashing cobalt alarm. "If this is a threat briefing, then state your terms." Vey looked almost tired. "Our terms?" he said. "You misunderstand again." He stepped aside. The glass wall behind him cleared fully, and at last the chamber saw what lay beyond. Not one hidden fleet. A formation. Rows upon rows of dark vessels suspended in a construction void, the size of a small moon's orbit, nested in layers of scaffolds and rotating shield webs. Some were complete, most half-built, all immense, hundreds at minimum. Fabrication gantries crawled over them like silver insects. Cargo lighters threaded between them in disciplined swarms. In the deeper dark behind the shipyards glimmered more structures, cylinders, docks, reactors, habitation vaults, perhaps entire subterranean stations open to vacuum. No known human facility approached this scale. Someone in the upper tiers whispered, "Where is that?" Vey answered immediately, "In a place your charts marked unprofitable." The image vanished from behind him and was replaced by a star map, not the council's, wider, layered with routes, fallback points, hidden depots, gravitational bypasses, and sealed corridors. Human territory, as the council had understood it, occupied only the surface of the map. Underneath it lay depth secondary routes through brown dwarf shadows, resource vaults in cometary shells, manufacturing nests inside irradiated belts, dormant stations tucked in magnetospheres no one bothered to patrol. Human space had never been a cluster of colonies. It had been a defense organism. And then Vey gave the chamber the sentence that changed the temperature of history. "You thought we were building a nation," he said. "We were building refuge." No one spoke. My memory crest trembled. Refuge for whom? The question arose everywhere at once, but no one asked it. Some part of us already feared the answer. Vey's eyes seemed older suddenly, lined with grief so deep it made his composure look less like confidence and more like restraint. "We studied your histories," he said. "The purges, the compliance wars, the species corrections, the famine sieges, the orbital sterilizations filed as civil pacification. We studied every time this council used the word stability to mean submission." Speaker Eric's surged upward. "Enough? No," Vey snapped, and for the first time his voice became dangerous. "You listen. Because while you debated whether humanity had earned standing, our analysts reached a unanimous conclusion. Eventually, one of your powers would come for us. Not because we threatened you, because we might one day refuse you." Silence again, raw and immense. "And we asked ourselves," Vey said, quieter now, "what happens when the galaxy decides a species like ours has become inconvenient?" He let that remain unanswered. Then a new tone cut across the chamber, an alarm from the outer defense ring of the council station. Sharp, repeating. Unauthorized emergent signatures, dozens at once. Delegates turned instinctively toward the vaulted external screens. They came alive with tactical glyphs. Ships were arriving, not firing, not attacking, simply appearing at the edge of council space in perfectly measured intervals. 1, then 3, then 12, then too many to count at first glance. Black human hulls, identical in silhouette to the monsters behind Vey, dropping from fold space with impossible precision just beyond weapons range. A message stamped itself across every tactical display in every known language. Human Relief Fleet 7 holding position, requesting permission to render aid. The word struck the chamber harder than threat ever could have. Because somewhere beyond the station's walls, beyond the politics and the fear and the lies we had told ourselves about humanity, something was happening big enough that a war fleet had arrived, calling itself relief. Vey looked into the hall one last time. "You sealed the border today," he said. "Wise. You're about to learn what we were keeping out." Then the signal cut, and before anyone in the council could speak, the first distress call from beyond human space broke through the emergency channels screaming. The first scream did not come in words. It came as distortion, an overloaded signal collapsing under its own urgency, a carrier wave shredded by interference and desperation. It punched through the council's emergency lattice like a physical force, warping displays, stuttering translation engines, flooding every receiver in the chamber with a sound that had no language and yet conveyed something unmistakable. Something is very wrong. Technicians scrambled. The Talar synods split their cognition threads across the incoming stream. Velth signal weavers unfurled diagnostic filaments. The speaker barked for channel isolation, but the transmission refused containment, replicating itself across every authorized frequency, as if guided. Then the distortion resolved. A face appeared. Not human. Karad, the armored visage of a Dominion fleet officer, filled the main projection, her crest cracked, one ocular plate flickering erratically. Behind her, the bridge of her command vessel burned in sections, emergency bulkheads slamming down in staggered intervals. Sparks drifted through low gravity like dying stars. "This is Commander Vratha Dominion 3rd Expansion Wing." Her voice broke, then forced itself back together with sheer will. To any council authority, this is a full emergency declaration. A tremor shook her image. Something impacted the hull behind her with a sound like a continent snapping. "We have encountered," she hesitated, as if the word itself resisted existence. "Unknown entities, not pirates, not recognized sovereigns. They are not responding to signal, threat, or surrender. They are." The transmission cut to static for half a second. When it returned, the bridge behind her was darker. "They are dismantling us." Silence crushed the chamber. Marshal Torgith surged forward, voice booming. "Vratha, give position. Give engagement parameters." Coordinates spilled across the display, auto-translated into every navigational frame in the hall. A murmur rippled outward. The location was beyond the Perseid reach, beyond human frontier space. Deep in what the Council maps labeled non-aligned dark volume, a region considered strategically irrelevant, uncolonized, and therefore largely ignored. Exactly the kind of place humans had quietly built infrastructure beneath. Vrata's breathing grew harsher. We engaged its standard deterrence posture. They closed distance without regard for loss. Their vessels, she turned, gesturing toward the forward screens. The image shifted. What appeared there froze, even the most hardened delegates in place. The enemy ships were wrong. Not in the way a new species designs are wrong different geometries, unfamiliar drive signatures, odd material choices. This was something else. Their hulls were asymmetrical, not through damage, but by design, like structures grown instead of built. Their surfaces shifted in slow, organic ripples, absorbing and re-emitting sensor pulses in patterns that defied known physics. No clear weapon ports. No recognizable engines. And yet, they moved. Fast. Too fast for their apparent mass, sliding through space with a predatory smoothness that made even the elegant Siren vessels look clumsy by comparison. One of the alien ships intersected a Carrid cruiser mid-broadcast. There was no flash, no beam, no missile trail. The cruiser simply came apart, not exploded unmade. Its armor peeled outward in layered spirals, internal compartments exposed and then stripped away as though reality itself had decided the ship no longer deserved cohesion. Vratha did not look away. They do not fire weapons as we understand them, she said. They rewrite interaction. Shields fail before impact. Armor does not resist. Systems decay. We have no countermeasure. Her voice dropped, something deeper than fear creeping in. They are not attacking infrastructure first. They are targeting escape vectors. They are hurting us. That word hit harder than the images. Hurting. The implication spread instantly. This was not annihilation for its own sake. It was controlled, directed, purposeful. Intent? Speaker Eric's demanded. Vrata's broken ocular flickered. Unknown. They do not communicate. They do not respond. They do not pursue once containment is established. Containment for what? A Siren delegate whispered. Vratha hesitated. Then, with visible effort, she said, "We believe they are selecting." A sound escaped the chamber, not quite a gasp, not quite a denial. Something between, "Selecting what?" Torgith growled. Vrata's gaze shifted off screen, following something none of us could see. Survivors. The word hung there, heavy and incomprehensible. Then the feed spasmed violently. The image tore sideways. The bridge behind her ruptured as something invisible carved through it. Atmosphere vented in a roaring gale. Karad crew were pulled into the void mid-scream. Vratha remained at her station, claws locked into the console. "This is not a request," she snarled into the failing channel. "This is a warning. They are advancing inward. They will reach." The transmission died. No static. No fade. Gone. For a heartbeat, the entire council forgot how to function. Then chaos erupted. Delegates shouted over one another, demands and denials colliding into a storm of noise. Emergency protocols cascaded through the station. Defense fleets were pinged, sensor nets redirected. Strategic projections recalculated in real time and failing, over and over, because the variables did not fit any known model. "They are beyond human space," a Velth analyst insisted, as if that fact alone provided safety. "For now," replied another voice. "Unknown species does not equal existential threat," said a Siren diplomat, though her skin patterns betrayed her gout. "They dismantled a Dominion fleet," Torgith snapped. "What classification do you require?" Speaker Eric's raised both arms, flooding the chamber with command authority. "Order! We will not descend into The external tactical displays flared again. More arrivals. Not the alien vessels. Human. The previously identified Relief Fleet 7 adjusted formation, its ships repositioning in precise, almost mathematical patterns. Additional human signatures blinked into existence at the edge of sensor range reinforcements, emerging from fold space in staggered waves. They did not advance. They held, watching, waiting. A channel request appeared across the chamber displays. Human Relief Fleet 7. Command link request. No one spoke for a fraction too long. Then Speaker Eric's, voice tight, said, "Open it." The image of Admiral Vey returned. But now the background had changed. The vast shipyard was gone. In its place, a command bridge wide, dim, lined with human officers moving in controlled urgency. Tactical projections floated in layered holograms around him, each one showing a different region of space. And in several of them, the same impossible, shifting alien forms. He did not waste time. "You've seen it," he said. "Yes," Eric's replied. "Explain." Vey exhaled slowly. Not frustration, not hesitation. Something closer to inevitability. "They're early," he said. The words struck like a physical blow. "Early?" Torgith barked. "You speak as if you expected this." Vey met his gaze. "We did." A wave of outrage surged through the chamber. "You knew of this threat and withheld it?" A Velth delegate snapped. "You allowed Council fleets to engage blind?" Another added. "You watched." "We prepared," Vey cut in, his voice sharp enough to silence them. "There's a difference." Speaker Eric's mantle dimmed, tension coiling. "Then prepare us now." "What are they?" Vey was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted. Less commander, more witness. "We don't know their origin," he said. "We don't know their biology, if they have one. We don't know their communication structure, or if they possess one in any form we recognize." He gestured, and one of the holograms expanded, showing a region far beyond even the Perseid reach. "Our first contact was 42 cycles ago," he continued. "A deep-range exploration vessel, long-duration mission, civilian crew. They transmitted fragments before loss of signal. We thought it was a sensor anomaly." The hologram shifted. A human ship, small, fragile, compared to the war machines we had just seen, drifted at the edge of a dark stellar void. Then the void moved. Something unfolded from it, not a ship emerging. A ship revealing itself, the same wrong geometry, the same impossible surface, the same presence. "We lost 3 more vessels before we understood it wasn't random," Vey said. "They weren't intercepting. They were waiting. Positioned in regions no one mapped, because there was nothing there." "Ambush predators," murmured a Searing analyst. Vey nodded once. "That was our initial assessment." "And now?" Eric's pressed. Vey's eyes hardened. "Now we think there's something else." He expanded another projection. Dozens of red markers, then hundreds, then thousands, all clustered beyond the outermost edges of mapped space. "They're not isolated," he said. "They're organized, layered, positioned in depth, not along trade routes, not near resources. In the dark between everything." A realization rippled outward. "They've always been there," someone whispered. Vey did not deny it. "You didn't tell us," Torgith said, low and dangerous. Vey looked at him. "When?" he asked. "When we were still being evaluated as a managed integration project. When your fleets ran compliance drills on our borders. When every request for strategic parity was buried in committee." No one answered. "So we adapted," Vey continued. "We built outwards, but we also built inwards. Redundancy, depth, refuge networks, evacuation corridors, mobile infrastructure, civilian military integration at every level." His gaze swept the chamber. "We didn't know what they were. But we knew one thing. If they ever moved inward in force, the galaxy as it exists now would not survive contact." Silence fell again. heavy, suffocating. Speaker Eriks spoke carefully. And now they are moving. Yes. Why? They hesitated. For the first time since his appearance, uncertainty flickered across his face. We don't know, he said. But we have a working theory. State it. Vey's eyes shifted, just briefly, to one of the tactical projections. In it, a human colony burned structures collapsing, evacuation ships scattering, and at the edge of the system, those same alien forms closing in. They didn't react to our expansion, he said slowly. They didn't respond to our probes, our signals, our presence. He looked back at the chamber. They reacted when we started building to survive them. The implication landed like a gravity well. A Velth delegate whispered. They noticed. Yes, Vey said. Another human fleet signature appeared on the outer displays. Then another. Relief Fleet 8. Relief Fleet 9. They were not just arriving. They were assembling, forming something larger. Speaker Eriks's voice dropped. Admiral, what exactly are you preparing to do? Vey did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried a weight that bent the room around it. We're not preparing, he said. He paused, then quietly. We already started. Outside the Council station, the human fleets shifted formation as one. And far beyond the sealed border, in the dark no one had ever bothered to chart, something vast began to move. The Council had always believed war announced itself. Declarations, mobilizations, orders igniting into light. Armadas converging along predictable vectors, banners carried on beams and hulls, strategy unfolding in clean lines across clean maps. War, to the elder civilizations, was something that began when it was recognized. Humanity did not share that belief. By the time the Council understood there was a war, it had already been fought for decades. The realization did not arrive all at once. It crept in through fragments, through the cold precision of Admiral Vey's words, through the impossible scale of human infrastructure, through the silent arrival of fleets that did not posture or threaten, but simply positioned, and through the data. Vey extended a hand, and the holographic projections surrounding him shifted again, layering over one another in cascading complexity. The chamber dimmed automatically as the displays compensated, bathing every delegate in a lattice of red, blue, and stark white. Council records, Vey said, contain thousands of references to what you classified as human logistical anomalies. The projections resolved into archival excerpts. Unregistered freight drift, delayed convoy transits, overbuilt supply depots in low-value sectors, duplicated manufacturing contracts, redundant communications relays, unprofitable infrastructure persistence. Each item was stamped with Council analysis notes. Inefficiency, poor optimization, emergent market instability, developing economy artifacts. The chamber watched in silence as those same entries were overlaid with new data. The unregistered freight drift became covert mass transfers between hidden depots. The delayed convoy transits aligned into staggered evacuation rehearsals. The redundant relays revealed themselves as hardened fallback networks, immune to centralized disruption. The unprofitable infrastructure formed a web-dense, resilient, layered across systems no one else valued. It was not random. It was not waste. It was architecture. You thought we were inefficient, Vey said. We were distributing survivability. A Siren delegate spoke, voice trembling with something that might have been awe. This scale of coordination, across competing governments, across corporations, across cultures, was never centralized, Vey finished. That was the point. He turned slightly, and for a moment, the human behind the uniform showed through something older than command authority, something born of a species that had survived its own collapse more than once. You assumed we would unify before we could act like this, he said. You were waiting for a capital, a hierarchy, a single system you could pressure. A faint, humorless breath escaped him. We never built one, The implications cascaded outward. No capital meant no decapitation. No central authority meant no singular point of failure. Humanity had not solved its fragmentation. It had weaponized it. Marshal Torgeth leaned forward, his voice low, controlled. Then who commands this organism? Vey met his gaze. No one, he said. And everyone. That answer would have been dismissed as evasion in any other context. Here, it felt like the most dangerous truth in the room. A Tylar machine synod flickered, processing at visible strain. Distributed consensus at this scale requires predictive modeling beyond current council capability. Vey nodded. We didn't predict everything. We didn't need to. We only needed to agree on one thing. He paused. That we would not be easy to erase. The chamber fell silent again. Because beneath all the data, all the projections, all the revelations of hidden strength, that was the core of it. Not conquest. Not dominance. Survival. But survival prepared for in a way no other species had ever attempted. Speaker Eric spoke carefully, as if each word might trigger something irreversible. You built this. In response to the unknown threat. Yes, and you did not inform the council. Vey's expression did not change. We tried. A ripple of confusion. We submitted exploratory data, he continued, early anomaly reports, requests for joint investigation, proposals for deep-range survey coordination. The projections shifted again. Archived council responses appeared. Low priority. Insufficient evidence. Resource allocation denied. Deferred pending committee review. The dates stretched across cycles, years, decades. You filed them as statistical noise, Vey said, because the regions we were talking about didn't matter to you. No one in the chamber could deny it. The dark volumes beyond mapped space had always been treated as empty. Not worth the cost of exploration. Not worth the risk. Not worth attention. Humanity had looked into that darkness anyway, and found something looking back. A Velth delegate spoke, voice thin. So you prepared in secret, while continuing to expand into council space. We expanded into unclaimed space, they corrected. Space you only noticed when it became useful. Semantics, the Velth snapped. No, Vey said quietly. Survival. The tension in the chamber tightened to the breaking point. You knew they would come, Speaker Eric said, and you allowed our fleets to engage you at Hecaton Gate instead of warning us. For a moment, Vey said nothing. Then, we needed to know if you would listen. The words landed like a verdict. You gambled with lives, Eric said. Yes. The simplicity of the answer was more shocking than any justification. And your conclusion? The speaker pressed. Vey's eyes hardened. That you would not listen until you were afraid. No one spoke. Because it was true. Because the council had just declared human space off limits not out of principle, but out of fear. And now, fear had arrived from the other direction. The tactical displays flared again. New data flooded in long-range sensor feeds, fragmentary transmissions, scattered distress calls from beyond the Perseid reach. Systems were going dark, not exploding, not even broadcasting final signals, just disappearing from the network, one by one. A pattern, expanding inward. They're accelerating, a Talar analyst reported. Movement vectors converging toward, the projection updated. The convergence point glowed, not at the council, not at the core worlds, at the edge of human space. They're coming for you, a Siren delegate whispered. Vey shook his head. No, he said. They're coming through us. The distinction was subtle and terrifying. They are not interested in territory, he continued. They are not engaging in resource extraction. They are not establishing occupation zones. He gestured toward the map. They are moving inward along density gradients, toward population, toward complexity. A realization rippled outward. They're not invading, Torgeth said slowly. They're harvesting, someone else finished. The word hung in the air like poison. They did not confirm it. He did not need to. Relief fleets are deploying to intercept along outer vectors, he said instead. Evacuation corridors are opening in contested sectors. We are offering assistance to any vessel within range. Speaker Eric's mantle flickered with something that might have been anger, or pride, or something more complicated. You expect us to accept human military presence within Council space. I expect you to decide whether your citizens live or die, they replied. The bluntness of it stripped away diplomacy entirely. A Velth delegate rose, voice sharp. We will not cede operational authority to a species that concealed a galactic threat for decades. And we will not ask your permission to save lives, Vey said. The two statements collided in the air between them. For a moment, it seemed inevitable that the situation would fracture, that pride would override fear, that the Council would retreat into its ancient patterns of control and denial. Then something unexpected happened. Marshal Torgath of the Carid Dominion stepped forward. He did not speak immediately. He looked at the projections, the burning systems, the advancing unknown, the human fleets holding position like a wall not yet raised. Then he spoke. Admiral Vey, he said, his voice carrying the weight of a warrior who had seen too many battles to pretend this was one he understood. If we accept your assistance, we accept your command? Vey shook his head. No. A ripple of confusion. We are not here to command you, he said. We are here to hold the line long enough for you to survive what's coming. Torgath studied him. And after that? A pause. Long enough to matter. Vey's answer came quiet. That depends on whether there's anything left to govern. Silence fell again. Heavy. Final. Speaker Eric's closed his eyes just for a moment. When he opened them, something had changed. Authorized joint defensive coordination, he said. The words echoed through the chamber like a breaking seal. Open all emergency corridors. Grant temporary operational clearance to human relief fleets within Council jurisdiction. A wave of shock. A surrender of authority unprecedented in Council history. But no one objected. Not one. Because outside the chamber, beyond the fragile illusion of control, the dark between stars was moving. And for the first time in galactic history, the Council was not the most powerful force in the room. The human fleets began to advance, not in chaos, not in panic, but in precise, measured vectors intercept lines forming across the void, like the first strokes of a barrier no one had ever seen before. And far beyond them, in the deep black where maps ended and assumptions died, something vast and patient shifted its attention fully toward the light, as if, at last, it had found something worth breaking. War did not begin with a charge. It began with a pause. The human fleets did not rush to meet the advancing unknown. They did not scatter to defend every system, did not fragment into desperate last stands the way most species would when faced with an incomprehensible threat. Instead, they moved with a discipline so controlled it seemed almost unnatural, falling back from exposed positions, abandoning outer stations, collapsing trade lanes, and drawing inward along vectors that only made sense when seen together. They were not defending territory. They were shaping space. Across the Perseid Reach and the bordering Council sectors, systems went dark, not destroyed, but evacuated. Civilian traffic surged through newly opened corridors, guided by human signals that cut through chaos with unnerving clarity. Entire populations were redirected in hours, then minutes, as if the routes had been mapped long before the need arose, because they had. I watched the data streams flood through the Council's command overlays, and for the first time in my existence, I felt something close to vertigo, not from confusion, but from scale. Every inefficiency the Council had once mocked was now revealing its purpose. Redundant relays became lifelines. Overbuilt depots became evacuation hubs. Civilian vessels transformed into transport fleets with preloaded manifests and contingency routes. Humanity had not been preparing to fight a war. They had been preparing to survive one that would consume everything else. Relief Fleet 7 advancing to intercept Vector Delta. A human officer's voice cut across the shared command channel. Calm, precise, almost detached. Relief Fleet 9 establishing anchor position. Civilian corridors open. Fallback nodes active. Secondary lattice holding. Their language was clinical. Controlled. No panic. No bravado. Just execution. Marshal Torgeth stood beside Speaker Eric's at the central command dais, watching the projections with an intensity that bordered on reverence. "They're not reacting," he said quietly. "They're following a script." Eric's mantle flickered. "A script written before we knew there was a war." "No," Torgeth said. "Before they did. That was the truth of it. Humans had not known when the threat would come, but they had assumed it would. And so they had built a response, not to a specific enemy, but to the idea of one. A general solution to extinction. The first engagement began at the outer edge of the newly drawn line. It did not resemble battle. It resembled inevitability colliding with refusal. The unknown entities, those shifting, impossible constructs, advanced as they had before. No formations. No signals. No hesitation. They moved like a phenomenon, not a fleet, their presence distorting sensor readings and eroding predictive models in real time. Against them, the human line held. Not as a wall, as a system. Ships did not cluster. They distributed, spacing themselves in layered depth, overlapping fields of fire and support in patterns too complex for most Council tacticians to parse in real time. Autonomous drones surged outward in waves, not to destroy, but to measure probing, adapting, feeding data back into a network that evolved with every second. Contact in 5. 4. The first alien construct crossed into engagement range. Human ships fired, not beams, not projectiles. Something else. The space between the fleets warped briefly, violently, as if reality itself resisted the interaction. The alien vessel shuddered, its surface rippling more violently than before. For a moment, just a moment, it slowed. Then it adapted. The distortion smoothed. Its motion resumed. Human ships adjusted instantly. New firing patterns. New frequencies. New approaches. They were not trying to overpower the enemy. They were trying to understand it and survive long enough to matter. The alien constructs reached the first layer of human drones. The drones did not retreat. They detonated. Not in explosions, but in controlled collapses of localized space-time, tiny, violent distortions that forced the alien vessels to react, to shift, to expend whatever unknown mechanism allowed them to rewrite reality around them. "They're forcing resource expenditure," a Talar analyst said, its voice tinged with something like awe. "They're tiring them." "Can they be tired?" a Siren delegate asked. "No," the machine replied after a fraction of a second, "but they can be slowed." And that, it seemed, was enough. Because behind the drones, behind the first line of ships, behind even the visible fleets, something else was forming. Something larger. Vey's voice cut through the channel. "Primary line, hold. Secondary layers, prepare to engage. Do not pursue. Do not break formation." The human ships obeyed without hesitation, even as the alien constructs began to breach the first defensive layer, even as ships were lost. The first human vessel to die did not explode. It held. For 3 full seconds after contact, it held. Its hull peeled away in spiraling layers, its internal structure exposed to the void, systems failing one by one, and still it transmitted. Still it fed data into the network. Still it anchored its position in the line. Then it was gone. No debris, no wreckage, just absence, and the line closed. Another ship shifted into place, filling the gap with mechanical precision. No hesitation, no warning, not yet. "They're sacrificing themselves," a Velth delegate whispered. "No," I said, before I realized I was speaking aloud. They turned toward me. I felt my memory crest tremble, every instinct in my species screaming that I was witnessing something that would define eras. They are not sacrificing, I said. They are spending. The distinction mattered, because sacrifice implies loss without return. This was not that. Every destroyed ship, every detonated drone, every collapsed position fed into the system data, time, adaptation. The human line was not static. It was learning, evolving. The alien constructs pushed deeper and slowed, imperceptibly at first. Then measurably, human fire adapted, patterns shifted. Frequencies aligned with newly discovered vulnerabilities, or at least newly discovered resistances. The unknown ships no longer moved with perfect smoothness. Their rippling surfaces grew more erratic, as if the constant pressure forced them into instability. They're forcing them to respond faster than they can optimize, the Talar analyst said. They're overloading their adaptation cycle. Marshal Torgeth bared his teeth. They're hunting the hunters. But even that was not enough, because the aliens kept coming. More of them, from deeper in the dark. The projections updated, and a wave of cold swept through the chamber. The initial contact had been a vanguard. What followed was something else entirely. The scale dwarfed everything before it. Hundreds, then thousands. The human line, vast as it was, suddenly looked finite. "Admiral," Speaker Eric said, his voice tight, "your line will not hold at this rate." Vey did not respond immediately. He was watching the same data, the same projections, the same impossible advance. And he spoke. "It's not supposed to." The words struck like a shockwave. "What?" Eric's demanded. "The line isn't the defense," Vey said. A new set of projections unfolded, behind the human fleets, far behind, something immense. At first, it looked like another formation of ships. Then the scale resolved. It was not a fleet. It was a structure. A lattice spanning light minutes of space, assembled from hundreds of interconnected platforms, reactors, and gravitational anchors. It glowed faintly, like a star being born in pieces. The chamber fell into stunned silence. "What is that?" someone whispered. Vey's voice was steady. "That," he said, "is why we needed time. The human line was not meant to stop the enemy. It was meant to delay them, to buy moments, minutes, enough for something behind it to finish." The alien constructs surged forward, pressing harder now, their movements less controlled, more aggressive, as if they sensed what was forming beyond the line. Human ships began to fall faster. Gaps opened, closed, opened again. The line bent, but did not break. "Primary line hold," Vey repeated. A human officer's voice, strained but steady, came through the channel. "Admiral, we are approaching threshold losses." "I know," Vey said. A pause, then softer. "Hold." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not doubt, not fear. Something heavier. Regret. The lattice behind the line flared brighter. Energy surged through its structure, arcs of contained power leaping between nodes in patterns that defied immediate comprehension. "What is it doing?" Eric's asked. Vey did not answer. Because at that moment, the alien constructs changed. They stopped advancing, not retreating, not attacking, pausing, as if they were observing. The entire battlefield held in a fragile, impossible equilibrium. Human ships, battered and burning, maintaining formation. Alien constructs, rippling and shifting, suspended in eerie stillness. And behind it all, the growing light of something the galaxy had never seen. Then, for the first time since their arrival, the unknown entities responded, not with weapons, not with movement, with signal. Every display in the chamber flickered, every system strained. And across the shared network, a pattern emerged, not language. Not exactly, but structure, intent, recognition they had noticed. Not just humanity, but what humanity had built. And in that moment, as the signal resolved into something almost communicative, the lattice behind the human line reached full power. Vey closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "Everyone," he said quietly, "this is where it gets worse." The alien signal shifted, and for the first time, it felt like it was speaking. The signal did not translate. It did not convert into sound or symbols or any structure the Council's vast linguistic engines could render into meaning. It arrived as pattern-layered, recursive, impossibly dense. A cascade of relationships rather than statements. Cause without language. Intention without grammar. And yet, everyone in the chamber felt it. Not heard. Felt. A pressure behind cognition. A weight that bent thought toward a single inescapable realization. We have been seen. Across the tactical displays, the alien constructs held their positions, no longer advancing, no longer attacking. Their surfaces rippled in synchronized waves now, as if the entire formation had become a single distributed mind focusing its attention on humanity, on the lattice, on the line that refused to break. A Talar machine synod spoke first, its voice fractured by processing strain. Pattern is not random. It is structured. It stopped. Then, after a fraction of a second that stretched too long, it is evaluative. The words settled into the chamber like frost. "They're not communicating," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "They're assessing." No one contradicted me. Because it fit. Everything we had seen, the herding, the containment, the selection, it was not conquest. It was not even predation in the way most species understood it. It was something colder, something patient. Admiral Vey did not look surprised. "They've done this before," he said. Speaker Eric's turned sharply. "You know that?" "No," Vey replied. "We inferred it." He gestured toward the projection, where the alien pattern continued to unfold layer upon layer of shifting structure. "They didn't react to our existence," he said. "They reacted to our resistance, to our preparation, to our refusal to collapse when pressure was applied." A pause. "They're not here because we're here," he added. "They're here because we're difficult." The implication struck like a blade. Every species in the chamber had expanded, colonized, fought wars, survived crisis. But none had built their civilization around the assumption of inevitable annihilation the way humanity had. And now something in the dark had noticed that difference. A Velth delegate whispered, "We're being judged." "No," Vey said. His eyes were fixed on the lattice behind the human line, now blazing with contained power. "Not judged." He paused. Filtered. The alien pattern shifted. For a moment, it aligned. And something inside the Council's translation systems, something not designed for this, caught a fragment. Not a word. Not a sentence. A concept. Threshold. The chamber went still. Then another fragment. Viability. And then, unmistakably, retention. The meaning did not need translation. "They're not destroying civilizations," Eric said slowly. "They're selecting which ones continue." A Siren delegate recoiled. By what criteria? No one answered, because the answer was already forming. Resilience, adaptation, survivability under pressure. The things humanity had built its entire existence around. The alien constructs shifted again, their formation tightening, focusing not on the human fleets, not on the Council systems, but on the lattice, on what humanity had been building in secret for decades. "They understand it," the Talar Synad said, voice almost reverent. "They recognize its function." "What function?" Torgith demanded. Vey finally answered. "It's not a weapon," he said. The chamber froze. "It's a gate." Silence. Absolute. A Velth delegate laughed, a brittle, disbelieving sound. "A gate to where?" Vey's gaze did not waver. "Away," the word echoed. "You built an escape?" Eric's asked. "No," Vey said. "We built a chance." He turned slightly, and for the first time since his broadcast began, the weight of what he carried became fully visible. "We don't know what they are," he said. "We don't know why they do this. But we know what happens when they arrive in force." His voice dropped. "Civilizations disappear. No one spoke. Not destroyed," he continued. "Not conquered. Removed. Systems go dark. Networks collapse. No debris. No signals. Just absence." He let that settle. "So we asked a different question," he said. "Not how to fight them. Not how to stop them." His eyes moved across the chamber. "How to survive them." The lattice behind him surged brighter, its structure stabilizing into something almost geometric, almost comprehensible. "A transit network," a Talar analyst whispered. "But not through space." "Through what then?" someone asked. They did not answer directly. "Somewhere they are not," he said. The alien constructs began to move again. Not attacking. Advancing, slowly, deliberately, toward the human line, toward the lattice. "They've made a decision," Torgeth said. "Yes," they replied. "And us?" Eric's asked. They looked at him. "For the first time," he said, "that might depend on us." The human line shifted. Not forward. Back. Deliberately yielding space, drawing the alien constructs deeper into a narrowing corridor that led directly toward the lattice. "They're letting them through," a Velth delegate said, horrified. "No," I said again, my voice steadier now despite the storm inside me. "They're guiding them." Because the pattern was clear. The human fleets were not trying to stop the advance anymore. They were shaping it, channeling it, forcing the unknown entities into alignment with the lattice's activation field. "Admiral," Eric said, realization dawning, "what happens when they reach it?" Vey's answer came without hesitation. "We find out if we were right." The first alien construct crossed the threshold. The lattice reacted instantly. Light no, not light, something deeper. Something structural flared across its entire span. Space bent, not violently, but smoothly, as if a hidden layer of reality had been exposed and was now being engaged. The alien vessel did not resist. It entered and vanished, not destroyed, not dismantled. Gone. The pattern across the alien fleet shifted violently. For the first time, something like disruption rippled through their formation. They didn't expect that, the Talar Synod said. They expected resistance, Vey said. Another alien construct crossed the threshold. Gone. A third. Gone. The human line tightened, holding the corridor, forcing more of the unknown entities toward the lattice. But not all of them. Some began to deviate, to spread, to move around the corridor, toward the wider galaxy, toward everything unprotected. "They're adapting," Eric said. "Yes," they replied. "And the gate?" Torgeth asked. Vey's expression darkened. "It won't hold forever." The chamber erupted again, fear, urgency, realization colliding. How many can it take? What happens to those that pass through? Where do they go? Vey did not answer, because he did not know, or because the answer was worse than the question. The lattice surged again, brighter now, strained. Human ships began to fall faster as they tightened the corridor, sacrificing position after position to maintain alignment. "Admiral," a human officer's voice broke through. "We are exceeding structural tolerance. We need to withdraw." Vey closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, then opened them. "Negative," he said. A pause. Then, quietly, "Hold." The same word, the same weight. The alien constructs pressed harder now, some entering the lattice, others slipping past the edges of the corridor. One broke through, just one. It surged past the human line, ignoring fire, ignoring interference, moving with terrible purpose toward the open galaxy beyond. Every display in the chamber tracked it. A single point of impossible motion. A single breach. "Intercept!" Eric shouted. Human ships moved, But they were too far, too committed, too late. The alien construct accelerated, straight toward the nearest inhabited system. And for the first time since the battle began, Admiral Vey's composure cracked, not in panic. In something else, something colder. "Deploy fallback protocol," he said. A human officer hesitated. "Admiral Backwell, I know," Vey said. A pause. "Then do it." The projections shifted. A new signature appeared, not from the lattice, not from the fleets. From the system, the alien construct was approaching. A human colony, one that had already been evacuated. Or so everyone had believed. Deep beneath its surface, something woke up. Something that had been waiting. And as the alien construct closed in, reality around the colony began to fracture. Not like the lattice, not like the alien vessels. Something else entirely. Unstable, violent, final. Speaker Eric stared at the display, horror dawning. "Admiral, what is that?" Vey did not look away. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Our last answer." The alien construct entered the system. The fracture expanded. And just before everything vanished into blinding, impossible distortion, the alien signal changed. Not evaluation, not selection. Something new. For the first time, it felt like uncertainty. Then the system disappeared. And across the galaxy, every human fleet, every hidden network, every prepared refuge, shifted to a new phase. Because the war humanity had prepared for was not about winning. It was about deciding what deserved to survive. And the question had just been asked. For a long moment after the system vanished, no one in the council chamber understood what they were seeing. There was no explosion, no debris field, no radiation plume. Just absence clean, absolute and wrong. The star remained dim and steady, its gravitational hold intact. But everything else, the colony, the orbitals, the incoming alien construct, was simply gone, not scattered, not reduced, removed. A perfect sphere of nothing, marked where a world had been. The chamber did not erupt this time. It went still. Even the most volatile delegates, the ones who had argued and shouted and demanded explanations only moments before, fell into a silence so deep it felt like reverence or terror mistaken for it. Because they had seen this before, in fragments, in records, in the quiet disappearance of entire civilizations that had left no ruins behind. The unknown entities did not destroy. They erased, and now humanity had done the same. Speaker Eric's voice came slowly, as if dragged upward from something heavy. "You can replicate them." Vey shook his head. "No," he said. "We can't." A pause. Then, more quietly, "We can interrupt them." The distinction mattered. It mattered more than anything else in that moment. Because if humanity had learned to mimic the enemy, the galaxy would already be lost. But this was something else. Not imitation. Not parody. Interference. Marshal Torgoth's claws dug into the command railing. "You erased your own colony." Vey did not flinch. "We evacuated it," he said. "That is not what I asked." "No," Vey agreed. "It isn't." The truth hung there, heavy and undeniable. Even empty, even stripped of life, the colony had been destroyed utterly, permanently, to stop a single breach. A Velth delegate found her voice, thin and shaking. What is that weapon?" Vey's gaze shifted, not to the chamber, but to something beyond it, perhaps to the memory of the decision. "It isn't a weapon," he said. No one believed him. "It's a denial field," he continued. "A localized collapse of interaction space. It prevents persistence." The words struggled to carry the concept. "It makes a region of reality, incompatible with continued existence," he finished. Silence. The Talar Synod processed for several seconds before responding. "You are describing an engineered absence." "Yes. And you can deploy this." "At will?" No, Vey said immediately. We can deploy it once per prepared site. A ripple of understanding. These were pre-built, Eric said. Yes. How many? Vey did not answer. He didn't need to. The projections behind him shifted again, revealing faint markers scattered across human space and disturbingly beyond it. Not many, but enough. A network of last resorts. A map of places humanity had decided it was willing to lose to ensure something else could live. They're not just building refuge, I said, my voice barely audible even to myself. They're choosing sacrifice points. Vey glanced at me, just briefly. Every species does, he said. No, I replied. Every species loses them. You planned them. He did not deny it. The alien formation reacted. For the first time since the battle began, its movements lost their perfect cohesion. Constructs shifted unpredictably, their advance stuttering as if the system itself had been forced to recalculate. The pattern across the network changed again. Faster now, denser. The Council's systems strained to keep up. They're adapting to the interference, the Talar Synod reported. But there is variance, instability, uncertainty, Eric said. Yes, a pause, or something analogous. That word uncertainty spread through the chamber like a fragile, impossible hope. Because if the unknown entities could be made uncertain, then they were not invincible. Vey did not share the hope. They'll compensate, he said. They always do. The weight of experience in his voice crushed the moment before it could grow. You've done this before, Torgith said. Vey nodded once. Twice. And it worked? Vey hesitated. Then it delayed them. Not victory. Not even survival. Delay. The human line was collapsing now. Not breaking but thinning, stretching beyond sustainable limits as more alien constructs slipped past the corridor, forcing new engagements across a widening front. Relief fleets shifted, redeploying with impossible speed, but even their precision could not cover everything. They're spreading, a Siren analyst said, panic creeping into her voice. They're bypassing the gate. Of course they are, Vey replied. Then the gate was never meant to stop all of them. The realization hit like a blow. It was meant to stop enough, I said. Vey looked at me again. Yes, the chamber fell silent. Because now the shape of the strategy was clear. The lattice was not a shield. It was a filter. It reduced the threat, thinned it, forced it to divide its attention, its resources, if such a concept even applied. And the denial fields, they were the final measure. The points where humanity would choose to erase space itself rather than let the unknown pass. Speaker Eric's voice trembled, just slightly. And if that is not enough? Vey did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter than before. Then we keep going. Going where? The speaker demanded. Vey's eyes shifted to the lattice, to wherever that leads. The implications settled slowly. Humanity was not just building refuge. It was building an exit, a way out of the galaxy itself, or out of whatever layer of reality the unknown entities occupied. The alien signal surged again, stronger, more focused. The fragments that slipped through translation became sharper, more coherent. Deviation, anomaly, interference, and then correction. The word struck like a hammer. They're escalating, the Talar Synod said. Yes, Vey replied. The alien constructs changed, not just in movement, in form. Their shifting surfaces stabilized, their erratic ripples smoothing into something more defined, more efficient. New structures emerged along their hulls, not grown, but formed, as if they were redesigning themselves in response to what they had encountered. They're learning faster, the Synod reported, adapting at accelerated rates. The human line faltered, just slightly, but enough. Another breach, then another. 2 alien constructs slipped past the defensive layers, diverging toward different systems. Intercept vectors failing, a human officer reported. "We cannot cover both." Vei's jaw tightened. "Mark both systems," he said. A pause. "Prepare fallback." The officer hesitated. "Admiral, those are Council worlds." Vei did not look at him. "I know." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Final. Speaker Eric stepped forward, his voice sharp with something between command and desperation. "You will not deploy that weapon in Council territory without authorization." Vei turned his gaze back to the chamber. "For 83 cycles," he said, "we asked for authorization to be taken seriously." The silence that followed was unbearable. "You denied it," he continued. "You minimized us. You evaluated us." His voice did not rise. "It didn't need to. Now you're asking for control over the only thing standing between your citizens and erasure." Eric's held his ground. "We are the Council." Vei's expression softened, not in respect, in something like pity. "Yes," he said. A pause. "And this is what you look like when it isn't enough." The alien constructs accelerated. The two breaches widened, their trajectories unmistakable, now one toward a densely populated trade hub, the other toward a Siren cultural world, its biosphere considered one of the most delicate and irreplaceable in the galaxy. "Admiral," the human officer began. Vei raised a hand. "Hold," he said. "Not yet." The word was unspoken. The chamber watched, breath held across 700 species. The alien signal surged again, and this time it changed. Not just in structure, in tone. For the first time since contact, it did not feel like observation, or evaluation, or correction. It felt like recognition. The fragments aligned. Clearer now, stronger, adaptive, persistent, non-compliant. And then a pause, a shift. As if something vast and distant had focused its full attention on a single, unexpected detail. On humanity, on the line, on the refusal to collapse. The final fragment came through, sharper than anything before it. Not a word. A decision. Retain. The chamber froze. Because in that moment, the meaning was undeniable. Humanity had passed, not the test they had chosen, the one imposed upon them. The alien constructs slowed, not retreating, not advancing, re-evaluating. And in that fragile, impossible pause, the two breach vectors continued forward, unstopped, unchallenged, heading for worlds that had not prepared the way humanity had. Speaker Eric's voice broke. "Admiral, do something." Vei closed his eyes. For the first time since the beginning, he looked tired. Truly tired. When he opened them, the weight of his species sat behind them. "We already did," he said. A pause. Then, quietly, "Now it's your turn." The chamber stared at him, uncomprehending. And then new signals appeared. Not human, not alien. From the two threatened systems, emergency broadcasts, civilian channels, military frequencies, all lighting up at once. Not with panic, not with distress, with something else. Something no one in the Council had expected. Coordination. The first message came from the trade hub. A human voice. But not military. Civilian. Steady. Resolved. "This is Port Authority Sigma 9. All evacuation routes are compromised. We are initiating local denial protocol." The chamber went cold. "That system isn't human-controlled," a Velth delegate said. "No," I whispered. "It learned." The second signal came from the Siren world. A chorus of voices, harmonized in their species' ancient tradition. "We will not be taken," they sang. "We will not be unmade. We choose our ending." They did not move, did not speak. As the first of the two systems began to fracture, not under human command, but by its own decision, the alien constructs slowed further, watching, learning, and for the first time, something like hesitation spread through them, because the question had changed. It was no longer whether humanity would survive. It was whether the galaxy would become something that deserved to. And as the second system ignited its own denial field, the alien signal shifted one final time. Not evaluation, not correction. Something new, something uncertain, something that had not existed when the war began. Consideration. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. And somewhere beyond the reach of every map ever drawn, something ancient began to wonder if it had made a mistake. The second system did not vanish like the first. It chose how to end. Where the human-prepared colony had collapsed into a clean sphere of engineered absence, the Syrian world unfolded its denial, differently layered, harmonic, almost deliberate in its final expression. Its oceans rose in silent tides against gravity. Its atmosphere refracted into spectral veils. Its cities dissolved into patterns of light that lingered a fraction longer than physics allowed. It was not destruction. It was refusal shaped as art. And then it too was gone. The alien constructs did not advance. They did not retreat. They held. Across every projection, across every sensor grid, across every layer of reality the Council could perceive, the unknown entities remained suspended in perfect stillness, as if something fundamental in their process had been interrupted or challenged. The signal that flowed from them now was different. Not faster, not denser, quieter, simpler. The fragments that slipped through translation were no longer layered in recursive complexity. They were singular, focused, pattern deviation, distributed adaptation, self-directed termination. The chamber listened in silence. Because now, for the first time, the unknown entities were not merely observing humanity. They were observing what humanity had caused. A galaxy that had learned. A Syrian delegate collapsed to her knees. Her bioluminescence dimmed to a soft morning blue. "They chose," she whispered. "We chose." Marshal Torgeth did not look at her. His gaze remained locked on the projections. "They taught us how," he said. "No," I said. "They showed us we could." The distinction mattered, because what had just happened had not been commanded by humanity. It had not been coordinated. It had been understood, adopted. The alien signal shifted again. The word that came through next was unmistakable. Propagation. The chamber felt it. The meaning. The realization. This act of self-determined denial, of refusing to be erased on someone else's terms, was not an anomaly. It was becoming a pattern. And the unknown entities had not expected that. Admiral Vey stood very still on his command deck, the weight of the moment etched into every line of his face. "They're recalculating," he said quietly. Speaker Eric's turned to him. "Because of us?" "Because of all of us," Vey replied. A pause. Then they didn't account for cultural transmission. The words rippled outward. Because that had always been humanity's most underestimated trait, not their resilience, not their adaptability, their contagion, ideas, behaviors, ways of thinking that spread faster than fleets, faster than signals, faster than fear. The Council had once feared human culture for its instability, its unpredictability, its refusal to remain contained. Now that same trait was doing something no weapon, no fleet, no strategy had managed. It was changing the rules of the conflict. The alien constructs began to move again. But not forward, not inward. They shifted laterally, redistributing, repositioning, as if the axis of their advance had been altered. "They're not pressing the attack," a Talar Synod reported. "They're reassessing target priorities." "Or abandoning them," a Velth delegate said, hope creeping into her voice. "No," they said. "They don't abandon." The certainty in his tone extinguished the hope before it could grow. "They're adapting to a new variable," he continued, "one they didn't anticipate." "What variable?" Eric's asked. Vey looked at the projections, the human fleets, the fading echoes of the denial fields, the alien constructs suspended in their strange, patient reconsideration. "Choice," he said. The word settled into the chamber like a seed. Because until this moment, the unknown entities had treated civilizations as systems, processes, inputs, and outputs. They had evaluated resilience, adaptability, persistence. But they had not accounted for something messier, something irrational, something human. The decision to choose your own end, to deny not just defeat, but the terms of defeat, to become unpredictable in the most fundamental way. The alien signal flickered. Then, for the first time since it began, it faltered, not in transmission, in structure. The patterns lost coherence, their recursive layers collapsing into something simpler, more fragmented. The translation system strained, and caught a fragment that sent a shock through the chamber. Unresolved. The word hung there. Impossible. The unknown entities, ancient, incomprehensible, unstoppable, had encountered something they could not immediately resolve. Torgith let out a low, disbelieving sound. We confused them. No, they said softly. We surprised them, and that perhaps was worse. Because surprise meant possibility. It meant the process was not fixed, not inevitable. The human fleets held their positions, no longer pressing forward, no longer retreating. The lattice behind them dimmed slightly, its function shifting from active filtering to something more passive waiting, watching, ready. The galaxy itself seemed to exist in a suspended state. A war paused not by victory or defeat, but by uncertainty. Speaker Eric stepped forward, his voice steadier now, though no less burdened. What happens next? He asked. They did not answer immediately. Because for the first time since the beginning of the conflict, he did not know. They've never stopped before, he said. Not like this. A Siren delegate rose slowly, her light returning in faint, trembling patterns. Then maybe they won't, she said. Maybe they've seen enough. Vey looked at her. There was something in his expression, then something fragile, almost hopeful. But it did not last. They haven't withdrawn, he said. They're still here. As if in response, the alien constructs shifted again, not advancing, not retreating, reconfiguring. Their formation stretched outward, expanding across a wider front, but not toward the core systems, not toward the densest populations. Toward the edges, toward the dark. There, pulling back, a Velf analyst said, disbelief coloring her voice. No, the Talar Synod corrected. They're repositioning to observe. The alien signal stabilized once more. Simpler now, cleaner. And when the next fragment came through, it carried a weight unlike anything before it. Not evaluation, not correction, not selection. A question. Why persist? The chamber went still. Because this was not a statement, not a command. A question, directed not at humanity alone, at all of us. Vey closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the exhaustion was still there, but something else had joined it. Resolve. They're asking for a reason, he said. Erix stared at him. Then give them one. Vey almost smiled. A small, tired expression. We already did, he said. He gestured toward the fading echoes of the two vanished systems. Toward the human line that it held when it should have broken. Toward the fleets that had come not to conquer, but to protect. Persistence isn't logical, he said. It isn't efficient. It doesn't maximize survival probability. His gaze swept the chamber. It's a choice. The alien signal flickered again. Processing. Evaluating. For the first time, it did not immediately respond. And in that silence, something unprecedented happened. Across the galaxy, in systems far from the front, far from the battle, far from the reach of human fleets or alien constructs, signals began to light up. Not distress calls, not military alerts. Messages from dozens of species, then hundreds. A chorus spreading outward through the network. Not coordinated, not commanded, but aligned. each one carrying a variation of the same idea, the same answer. We persist because we choose to. The council chamber filled with the sound of its voices, tones, harmonics, languages overlapping into something vast and undeniable. A declaration not of power, of identity. The alien constructs did not move. The signal pulsed once more, and it changed. Not into a statement, not into a command, into something that felt impossibly like hesitation. And then, across the entire front, the unknown entities began to withdraw, not in defeat, not in retreat, but in something slower, more deliberate, as if stepping back from a problem that required more thought. The projections updated, the advancing wave receded, the pressure lifted, not gone, but reduced. The war did not end, but it changed. The chamber remained silent as the reality settled. Speaker Eric's spoke at last, his voice barely above a whisper. They're leaving. Vey shook his head. No, he said. They're waiting. A pause. Then, quietly, for what we become next. The stars beyond the council station seemed brighter now. Or perhaps the darkness between them had simply shifted, because somewhere, far beyond the reach of every map ever drawn, something ancient, something vast, something that had culled civilizations without question for longer than any species could remember, had encountered something it did not understand. And instead of erasing it, it had decided to watch. The galaxy exhaled. But no one relaxed, because the question had not been answered. Not fully. And the next time the unknown entities returned, they would not be asking. They would be deciding. And for the first time in history, that decision might not be theirs alone. The withdrawal was not relief. It only resembled it from a distance. Across the strategic displays, the unknown entities receded into the dark, not scattering, not collapsing, not dissolving, but reorganizing. Their formations stretched, thinned, and layered themselves at the edge of mapped space, just beyond the threshold of easy observation, like sentinels, or surveyors, or something waiting for a signal no one else could hear. The council chamber did not celebrate. It calculated. Emergency sessions replaced panic. Delegations clustered into tight formations, voices lowered, tones sharpened. The same species that had once dismissed humanity as inefficient now spoke in urgent fragments about distributed resilience, cultural propagation models, and denial field ethics. The galaxy had changed, and everyone knew it. Speaker Eric stood at the center of the chamber, no longer elevated, no longer distant. He had descended to the floor, a subtle gesture, but one that every delegate noticed. We are no longer discussing borders, he said. No one argued. We are no longer discussing sovereignty. Still no argument. We are discussing survival as a shared condition. That word shared would have been unthinkable days before. Now it was unavoidable. Marshal Torgeth spoke next, his voice steady, stripped of the dominance that once defined it. The humans prepared alone, he said. We will not make that mistake again. A Velth delegate bristled reflexively. You suggest unified command? I suggest unified understanding, Torgeth replied. Command can wait. Extinction will not. The chamber absorbed that, slowly, painfully, but without resistance. Because something had shifted at a deeper level than politics. The illusion of isolation was gone. Admiral Vey remained on the shared channel, but he was no longer the sole focus. Human fleets held their positions, maintaining the line, not advancing, not retreating, but present in a way that felt less like military posture and more like guardianship. It was unsettling, because guardianship implied responsibility, and responsibility implied a future. Admiral, Eric said, turning toward the projection, we need to understand what happens next. They did not answer immediately. He was watching something beyond the council's current sensor reach. When he spoke, his voice carried that same quiet weight. They're still there, he said. We know, Eric's replied. No, Vey said. You don't. He expanded a projection. At first, it looked empty. Then the filters adjusted, and the chamber saw them. Not the main formations, not the fleets that had advanced. Something deeper, vaster. The unknown entities extended far beyond the immediate conflict zone, layered in depth across regions of space no one had ever meaningfully explored. What we had encountered was a fraction, a probe, a test, a ripple at the edge of something incomprehensibly large. A Siren delegate whispered, "That's not a fleet." "No," Vey said. "It's a frontier." The word landed with quiet finality, because it meant the war had not been an invasion. It had been contact. I felt my memory crest tremble again, because this, too, fit a pattern. When two civilizations meet, there is always a moment where both sides decide what the other is. Enemy, prey, partner, irrelevant. Humanity had been classified as a variable. Now the classification was changing. But into what? The alien signal returned. Not as before. Not overwhelming. Not recursive. Simple. Focused. Directed. Observation continues. The translation came through cleanly this time. No strain, no distortion. The chamber felt it as a shift in gravity. There. Talking to us, a Velth delegate said. "No," Vey replied. "They're acknowledging us." The difference was subtle and terrifying, because acknowledgement meant recognition. Recognition meant relevance, and relevance meant we mattered. For the first time, in whatever framework governed those entities, the galaxy had become something worth watching. Speaker Eric's stepped forward. "If they are observing," he said carefully, "then they are also learning." "Yes," Vey said, "and we must assume they will return." "Yes." A pause, then stronger. The chamber absorbed that without protest, because it was inevitable. Everything the unknown entities had done suggested a process, one that adapted, refined, and optimized. They had encountered resistance. Now they would improve. Torgoth's voice cut through the silence. "Then we improve faster." It was not a question, not a suggestion. A declaration. For the first time, it did not come from humanity. It came from the Council, and something in the room aligned. The next hours passed in a blur of coordination, not perfect, not unified, but converging. Species that had never shared military doctrine began exchanging data. Cultural archives were opened not as artifacts, but as strategic resources. Patterns of resilience, of survival, of refusal were mapped, studied, and most importantly shared. Humanity did not lead this process. They facilitated it, quietly, efficiently, without claiming ownership. It was another lesson, perhaps the most important one yet. Power was not always about control. Sometimes it was about enabling others to stand. I found myself watching Vey again. Not as an enemy, not even as an ally, as a reference point. Because everything that had happened traced back, in some way, to choices humanity had made long before anyone else understood the stakes. "Admiral," I said, my voice carrying across the channel. He turned slightly. "Yes, Archivist." "You prepared for this alone," I said. "You built in silence. You endured in isolation. You chose to hold the line, even when it cost you everything." A pause. "Why didn't you leave?" I asked. The question hung there. Simple. Fundamental. Because if humanity had built an escape, if the lattice truly led somewhere beyond the reach of the unknown entities, then why not use it? Why stay? Why fight? Vey looked at me for a long moment. Then he answered, "Because we weren't the only ones here." The simplicity of it cut deeper than any speech. "You could have been," I said. "Yes," he agreed. A pause. Then, "But that wouldn't have been survival." The distinction struck like lightning. Survival, to humanity, was not just persistence. It was shared persistence. Anything else was something lesser. Something they refused to accept. The alien signal flickered again. A new fragment emerged. Clear, unambiguous. Collective adaptation detected. The chamber stilled. "They're noticing the change," Eric said. "Yes," they replied. "And?" They did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried something new. Not fear. Not certainty. Possibility. "That depends," he said, "on what they think it means." The projections shifted once more. Far beyond the visible front, deep within the layered expanse of the unknown entity's domain, something moved. Not a fleet, not a formation. Something larger, slower, a structure of impossible scale, unfolding like a thought made visible. The chamber watched in silence as it began to reorient, not toward humanity alone, toward the galaxy, toward all of us. The alien signal pulsed again, and this time the fragment it carried was not a question, not a statement. A threshold, next phase evaluation pending. The words settled into every mind, every system, every layer of awareness. The war was not over. It had only advanced, and whatever came next would not be a test of a single species, but of everything we had become together. The stars held their breath, and somewhere in the dark, something ancient prepared to decide not whether we would survive, but whether we were worth allowing to. No one in the council chamber moved when the words settled. Next phase evaluation pending. It was not a threat, not a promise, not even a warning. It was procedure, and that made it more terrifying than anything the unknown entities had done before, because procedure implied precedent, and precedent implied this had happened elsewhere, many times, across distances and histories the galaxy had never seen. The projections held steady on the vast structure now unfolding beyond the frontier of the unknown entity's domain. It was not a ship, not a station, not anything the council could name. It was architecture, not built, arranged, as if space itself had been persuaded into a particular shape. Its scale dwarfed everything humanity had constructed, even the lattice, even the hidden shipyards, even the layered networks of survival they had spent decades preparing. It moved slowly, not because it was limited, because it did not need to hurry. "Is that the source?" A Velth delegate whispered. Vey shook his head. "No," he said. "Then what is it?" A pause. Then, quietly, "A decision engine." The chamber absorbed the term, not fully understanding it, but feeling its weight. Speaker Eric stepped forward again, his voice steadier than before, but only because he had accepted that fear would not change what was coming. "They are preparing to evaluate us," he said. "Yes," they replied. "On what criteria?" They did not answer immediately. Instead, he brought up a new projection, not of fleets, not of systems, of time. A timeline stretched across the chamber, marked with faint point civilizations, some familiar, most not, each one ending, not in war, not in collapse, but in absence. "These are the ones we could trace," they said. "Trace?" Eric asked. "Fragments," they clarified. "Anomalies. Gaps in historical records. Regions where something should have been and wasn't." The timeline expanded. Patterns emerged. Intervals. Cycles. "They don't evaluate continuously," they said. "They evaluate in phases." A Siren delegate's voice trembled. "And the last phase?" Vey's gaze hardened. "Ended before your species discovered fire." Silence. Deep, ancient, because the implication was clear. The galaxy we knew, its powers, its history, its conflicts existed only because it had not yet been considered. Marshal Torgeth exhaled slowly, a sound like metal grinding. "So we are not the first." "No," they said. "And we will not be the last," I added quietly. He did not contradict me. The alien structure continued to unfold. Layers within layers, each one aligning with something invisible, something deeper than space itself. The signal returned again, stronger now, Clearer, not fragmented, not distorted. The translation systems did not struggle this time. They simply accepted. Evaluation parameters expanding. A pause. Then collective behavior prioritized. The chamber reacted instantly. What does that mean? A Velth delegate demanded. It means they're not judging us individually anymore, Eric said. They're judging us together. Every eye turned, almost instinctively, toward the human projection. Because whether anyone wanted to admit it or not, this had started with them. They did not shy from the weight of that. They encountered us first, he said. They adapted to us. And now? Torgith asked. Now they're adapting to what we changed. The chamber fell into a different kind of silence. Not fear, not panic, understanding, because this was no longer about a single species passing a test. Humanity had disrupted the process, but disruption alone was not enough. Now the question had shifted. Not can one species resist, but can a galaxy learn? The council began to move again, not in chaos, in purpose. Delegates broke into coordinated clusters, exchanging data at speeds that would have been unthinkable days before. Strategic doctrines were rewritten in real time. Cultural archives, once guarded as sacred, were opened and integrated into shared models of behavior. Resilience was no longer a human trait. It was becoming a galactic one. I watched it happen. And for the first time in my existence, I did not feel like an observer. I felt like part of something forming. Admiral, Eric said, turning back to Vey, what do we need to do? Vey did not answer immediately. He was watching the same thing I was, the galaxy changing. When he spoke, his voice carried something new, not command, not warning, instruction. We stopped thinking like we used to, he said. A pause. We stop optimizing for stability. Another pause. We start optimizing for survival under uncertainty. The words landed with quiet force, because they required something no council doctrine had ever allowed. Adaptation without permission. Change without consensus. Risk. They will test pressure points, Vey continued. Systems. Cultures. Decisions. He looked directly at the chamber. They will look for where we break. Torgith's voice was low. Then we don't break. Vey shook his head. No, he said. We bend. The distinction mattered. Because bending meant flexibility. It meant unpredictability. It meant refusing to follow a single pattern long enough to be understood. The alien signal pulsed again. A new fragment emerged. Non-linear response detected. The chamber held its breath. Because that was exactly what Vey had just described. They were already watching. Already learning. Already adjusting. The vast structure beyond the frontier shifted again. Not closer. Not farther. Different. As if reconfiguring its own internal logic. They're incorporating the new data, the Talar Senad said. Yes, Vey replied. And the result? Vey did not answer, because for the first time since the beginning of the conflict, the outcome was not predictable. A new projection appeared. Not from the alien entities, from humanity, the lattice. It flared again brighter than before, its structure expanding, its reach extending. But this time, it was not alone. Across the galaxy, new signatures appeared, smaller, cruder, different, but unmistakable. Other species building, not identical structures, not copies, their own versions, their own answers. The idea had spread. They're watching that, I said. Yes, they replied. And? He looked at me. And for the first time since I had met him, there was something in his expression that felt almost uncertain. They didn't expect replication, he said. The alien signal flickered, then stabilized. The next fragment came through with perfect clarity. Emergent complexity increasing. A pause. Then, outcome uncertain. The chamber froze, because uncertainty, from something like that, was not weakness. It was possibility. Speaker Eric straightened. For the first time since the vote, since the fear, since the realization of how close the galaxy had come to erasure, he did not look overwhelmed. He looked resolved. Then we give them something they cannot resolve, he said. The council did not vote. There was no motion, no formal resolution. Because some decisions do not need to be recorded to become real. Across the galaxy, species began to change. Not into something unified, something connected. Different minds, different cultures, different solutions. All moving in the same direction, not because they were told to, because they chose to. The alien structure paused. For the first time since its emergence, it did not advance, it did not reconfigure. It held, as if watching something that did not fit any previous pattern. The signal came one final time. Not fragmented, not layered, clear, direct, and for the first time. Not a question, not a command, a statement. Re-evaluation required. The words echoed across every system, every mind, every layer of awareness. And then, silence. The alien constructs did not move. The structure did not advance. The signal did not return. The galaxy remained. Not safe, not victorious, but still here. And for the first time in its history, no one knew what would happen next. I, Sale of the Ninth Memory Choir, recorded it all. Every word, every decision, every moment where fear became action, and action became change. Because one truth had become undeniable. The day the Galactic Council declared human space off limits was not the day humanity separated itself from the galaxy. It was the day the galaxy began to become human. But as I sealed the record, one final anomaly appeared in the deep-range sensors. Far beyond the frontier, far beyond even the alien structures. Something new, something watching them, watching us. And for the first time since the unknown entities arrived, the signal that came from the dark did not belong to them. At first, the anomaly looked like noise. A fluctuation at the edge of deep-range resolution, barely above the threshold, where instruments begin to lie to preserve coherence. The kind of signal most systems filtered out automatically, categorized as interference from stellar drift or background radiation anomalies. But nothing was being filtered anymore. Not after what we had seen. Hold that channel, Vey said immediately, before the council systems could discard it. The projection expanded. The anomaly sharpened. And the chamber felt the shift before anyone understood it. Because whatever this was, it was not like the others. The unknown entities, the ones that had nearly erased us, had always felt vast, cold, systematic, like a force of nature that had learned to think. This felt aware, not in scale, in focus. The signal did not spread. It did not layer. It did not attempt to translate. It simply looked. A single point in the dark, fixed, unblinking, directed not at the galaxy, not at the council, not even at humanity, at the alien structure, at the decision engine. The chamber went silent in a way I had never experienced before. Not fear, not awe, recognition, instinctive, primal, the sense that something had just noticed something else, and we were. Between them. The Talar Synod spoke first. Its voice fractured in a way that suggested even machine cognition had limits. This signal does not match any known pattern set. They didn't look away from the projection. It's not trying to match, he said. Then what is it doing? Eric's asked. A pause. Then, interrupting. The alien structure reacted, not traumatically, not violently, but unmistakably. Its unfolding halted. Its layered architecture paused mid-configuration, as if some internal process had been suspended. The signal from it flickered, not collapsing, not failing, stuttering. For the first time since its appearance, the decision engine was not in control of its own process. The new signal pulsed again. Still simple, still singular, no translation. no structure the Council could parse. And yet, the alien entities responded. Across the frontier, the constructs shifted, not toward us, not away, toward the anomaly. Every formation, every layer, every distributed node of that incomprehensible system reoriented, focused. The galaxy disappeared from their attention. Marshal Torget's voice was low. "They're afraid." No one corrected him, because whatever emotion governed those entities, this was the closest equivalent. The alien signal surged. For the first time since the beginning of the conflict, it lost its clarity. Fragments collided, overlapped, contradicted. The translation system strained, then broke through just enough to capture something unprecedented. Interference unacceptable. The anomaly responded, not with complexity, not with force, with presence. The signal deepened, not louder, heavier, as if the space it occupied had gained weight. And then, for the first time since the unknown entities had appeared in our galaxy, they spoke, not to us, but to something else. The fragment that came through was not meant for translation, but it came anyway, because we were listening. Designation: Observer Class. A pause. Then, status: Non-participant. The anomaly pulsed again. The response came instantly. Status violation detected. The chamber froze. Because that meant, "They know each other," Eric said. Vey's voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. Yes, the alien structure shifted again. Not advancing, not retreating, aligning, as if preparing for something not directed at us, but at the anomaly. The signal from the unknown entities sharpened, focused, no longer uncertain, no longer evaluating, commanding. Withdraw. The word struck like a shockwave, because it was not directed at us, not at humanity. At the Watcher, the anomaly did not respond, not immediately. Then it changed. The projection struggled to render it, not because of scale, but because of absence. Where the signal had been a point, now it was space, a region, a distortion, not of light, of context. The stars behind it did not shift. They simply lost relevance, as if whatever occupied that space existed outside the framework. The rest of reality followed. The alien constructs recoiled, not dramatically, but enough. Enough to break their perfect cohesion. Enough to reveal something none of us had believed possible. They were not alone. The signal from the anomaly came through, not translated, not interpreted, understood, because it did not require language. It was intent, and that intent carried a single, unmistakable concept. Continue. The alien entities responded instantly, not with retreat, with resistance. The structure surged, its layered architecture snapping into a new configuration, one that radiated something we had not seen before. Force, not directed at us, at the anomaly. "Admiral," a human officer's voice broke through, strained. "Energy levels exceeding. This isn't like before." "I know," they said. For the first time, there was no control in his voice, only recognition. The chamber watched as two incomprehensible forces, one that had nearly erased the galaxy, and one that had just forced it to hesitate, aligned against each other. Not in battle, not yet, but in opposition. Speaker Eric's whispered, "What is that?" They did not look away. His answer came slowly, as if he were reaching for something he had hoped was not true. "They're not the only ones who watch," he said. The alien signal surged again. Clear, sharp, directed. Observer interference escalated. The anomaly did not retreat. It did not advance. It simply remained. And then the impossible happened. The alien constructs, those vast, patient, unstoppable entities, paused, not in calculation, not in evaluation, in hesitation. The chamber felt it, the shift, the moment where something that had always acted with absolute certainty Did not. The anomaly pulsed again. Stronger. Closer. And for the first time, it turned. Not toward the alien structure. Not toward the frontier. Toward the galaxy. Toward us. Every system in the council chamber flared. Every sensor spiked. Every mind organic, synthetic, and otherwise felt it. Not as fear. Not as threat. As awareness. And then, a fragment. Not from the alien entities. From the anomaly, not translated. Not processed. Understood, because it bypassed every system and went straight to the only place that mattered. You chose. The chamber froze. Because that was not observation. That was acknowledgement. A second fragment followed, softer, but heavier. Now we will see why. The alien structure surged. The anomaly deepened. The space between them began to fracture, not like the denial fields, not like the lattice. Something older, something fundamental. And for the first time since the war began, humanity was not at the center of the conflict. They were, the reason it had changed. They closed his eyes, just for a moment, then opened them. And in that moment, I understood something that would redefine everything we thought we knew. This was never about surviving the unknown. It was about being noticed by something worse. The stars dimmed, the frontier bent, and between the watchers and the watched, a new line was being drawn, one no species had ever crossed. And as the first ripple of that impossible confrontation reached the edge of known space, the human lattice flared to full power, not to escape, not to hide, to reach, toward something no one had prepared for. There are moments in history when everything that exists balances on a decision no one can fully understand. This was not one of those moments. This was worse. Because the decision had already been made, the frontier did not explode. It unraveled. Where the alien decision engine and the anomaly faced one another, space itself ceased behaving like a medium. Distances stretched without expanding. Light bent without curvature. Time hesitated, not stopped, not slowed, uncertain. The projections in the council chamber failed to render it properly. Models collapsed. Predictive engines returned null. Even the Talar Synods, whose cognition had once outpaced entire civilizations, fell silent as their processing loops encountered something they could not resolve. For the first time since we had begun observing the universe, we were witnessing something that did not follow it. The alien entities moved first, not in panic, in purpose. Their vast formations converged not toward the galaxy, but toward the anomaly layer upon layer, aligning into a configuration that radiated absolute intent, correction, not of us, of the interference. The anomaly did not respond with force. It did not expand. It did not defend. It simply was, and that was enough to stop them. The signal from the unknown entities surged one final time. Not fragmented, not uncertain, perfect. Observer class interference unacceptable. Correction authorized. The weight of those words bent the chamber, because whatever those entities were, they were not alone in their purpose. They were part of something larger, a system, and the anomaly had just violated it. "Admiral," Eric said, his voice barely steady, "if they escalate, they will," they said. No hesitation, no doubt. They don't stop. The human fleets moved, not toward the alien entities, not toward the anomaly, toward the lattice. Every surviving ship, every drone, every fragment of the line that had held against the impossible began to collapse inward, feeding into the structure humanity had built in silence for decades. Not retreating, converging. What are they doing? A Velth delegate demanded. I already knew. I felt it before they spoke. They're committing, he said. The lattice flared, brighter than it ever had before. Not just a structure now. A network, connected, across systems, across species. Because the moment humanity had shown what survival meant, the galaxy had answered. New signals surged into the lattice. Not human, Siren harmonic nodes, Karad power cores, Velth signal arrays, Talar processing anchors. Dozens of species hundreds feeding into the same impossible construct. Not identical, not synchronized, but aligned. They're linking, the Talar Synod whispered. No, they said. They're choosing. The alien entities reacted instantly. Their formations shifted, abandoning their previous configuration, redirecting toward the lattice with a speed that broke every known model. Because for the first time, the galaxy itself had become the anomaly. The signal from them sharpened, urgent, focused, escalation required. The decision engine surged, its layered structure collapsing inward, concentrating into something denser, sharper, more decisive. And then the anomaly moved. Not forward, not back. It expanded, not in size. In presence. The space it occupied deepened, as if reality itself had been forced to acknowledge something it had previously ignored. The alien entities hesitated. Again, longer this time. Because now, the equation had changed. Not one anomaly. Two. The anomaly signal came again. Clear. Direct. They persist. The alien response was immediate, irrelevant. And then, for the first time, the anomaly answered with something more than acknowledgement. Then observe. The lattice ignited. Not as a weapon. Not as an escape. As a statement, space-bent. Not violently, deliberately. The structure unfolded into something greater than its components, something no single species could have built, no single mind could have conceived. A network of choice. A geometry of refusal. A declaration that survival was not a calculation. It was a decision. The alien entities struck. Reality warped across the lattice's outer edge as the constructs unleashed their incomprehensible correction space peeling. Systems collapsing, existence itself pushed toward erasure. Human ships vanished. Alien constructs destabilized. The frontier dissolved into something that could not be called battle. And still, the lattice held. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough. Because it was not just structure anymore. It was intent. Shared, distributed, unpredictable. They can't resolve it, the Talar Synod said, voice breaking under the strain of processing the impossible. They're trying to model it, but it keeps changing. Of course it did. Because it was not a system. It was a choice, repeated, across billions of minds. The alien signal fractured. For the first time since their arrival, it broke. Unstable. Non-deterministic. Outcome divergence it stopped. The anomaly pulsed. Once. Now you understand. The alien entities did not retreat. They did not advance. They paused. Not in calculation, in recognition. Because for the first time, they had encountered something they could not reduce. Not because it was too strong. Not because it was too complex. Because it refused to be predicted. The signal came again. Slower, heavier. Persistence, acknowledged. The chamber held its breath. Collective deviation, accepted. A pause, long enough to matter. Outcome, deferred. And then the alien entities withdrew, not in defeat, not in retreat, in suspension. Their vast formations dissolving back into the dark, their presence fading beyond the frontier, not gone, but waiting. The decision engine collapsed. The anomaly dimmed. And for the first time since the war began, the galaxy was alone again. Silence filled the council chamber. Not empty, full, heavy with everything that had just happened. Speaker Eric's sank slowly onto the steps of the dais. It's over, someone whispered. No, they said. The word carried no fear, no urgency, just truth. They're still out there, he said. They're still watching. A pause. Then, but now, they're waiting for something different. I stepped forward, my memory crest still trembling with everything I had recorded, everything I had witnessed. For what? I asked. They looked at me. And for the first time since I had known him, he smiled, not with confidence, with understanding. For us to prove it wasn't a fluke, he said. The chamber absorbed that, because survival had not been the victory. Choice had been. The human fleets did not celebrate. They did not claim dominance. They did what they had always done. They began to rebuild, not alone. Across the galaxy, species moved not back to what they had been, but forward into something new, not unified, not identical, but connected by something deeper than treaties or alliances. The knowledge that survival was not guaranteed, and that made it meaningful. I sealed the record that day, not as an ending, but as a beginning. Because the day the Galactic Council declared human space off limits was the day we learned the most dangerous thing in the universe was not power, not intelligence, not even the unknown. It was a species that refused to accept the terms of its own extinction, and taught everyone else to do the same. Far beyond the frontier, in the silent dark where ancient watchers waited, the anomaly stirred once more, not intervening, not interfering, observing. And for the first time in all the cycles that had come before, it was not watching to decide what should be erased. It was watching to see what would happen if nothing was.